If Twitter is what it takes to force these teams to schedule some decent opponents, I'm all for it. Tweet away athletic directors. That's what it took between Mississippi State and Kansas State. Just happened a couple days ago. Mississippi State Athletic Director Scott Strickland and John Curry, the Kansas State Athletic Director. It started with a comment about a wardrobe selection during a charity event. So one of them commented, "Nice wardrobe," and then they started talking, and before you knew it, within 4 tweets, they had a home and home series scheduled between Mississippi State and Kansas State in 2018 and 2019. So again, if that's what it takes to get us some decent football games for some of these teams, not talking about some teams out there that really schedule difficult non-conference competition, but Mississippi State, an emerging power in the SEC Western Division, who could have its best season since going back to the late 1990s, needs to schedule tough, needs to act like an SEC team. Mark Rogers TV looking at the 2014 schedules across the country, college football. We've almost made it through the SEC, and we get to one of the worst schedules, certainly since I looked at Vanderbilt's non-conference schedule. So for Mississippi State, the toughest game, non-conference, has to be Southern Miss in the opener at home. Southern Miss. Mississippi State, let's remind you, you do play in the SEC. You actually went to a bowl game last year and have typically gone to bowl games. Okay, game number 2 is against UAB. Game number 3 is at South Alabama. Now, South Alabama, a fledgling early entry into FBS football, only been playing for about 5 years. We've interviewed South Alabama head coach Joey Jones a few occasions. They made it tough on Tennessee last season, so it's not like that couldn't be a decent football game, but Mississippi State, you have to schedule somebody. Last season, Oklahoma State. Okay, that's a nice game. Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Big 12 SEC. Nice job, but it doesn't happen enough in Starkville. Again, so the openers, Southern Miss, then UAB, then at South Alabama, later in the season on conference, a game against UT Martin. Mississippi State, you got to be better than this. There's an inferiority complex there in Starkville. There's got to be scheduling these football games. I went back to 2008, and aside from a home-and-home series against Georgia Tech that completely wiped the field with Mississippi State 38-7 and like 42-31, they've played nobody. They've played nobody since 2008. Aside from that game, they lost 21-3 last year against Oklahoma State, a game that they played in Texas. A lot of Jackson State games, a lot of Alcorn State games, a lot of UT Martin, a lot of Troy, South Alabama, Middle Tennessee. They've played them quite a few times. Play the ACC in the Big 12. Come on, play the ACC in the Big 12. So I love seeing this get done in 2018 and 19 for Mississippi State against Kansas State. Kansas State playing Auburn this season, and Kansas State certainly not afraid to play the tougher teams across the country as well. Let's get back to Mississippi State. We are knocking their non-conference schedule, but this is a team that could, with a few breaks, now I'm not expecting this, but with a few breaks, could vie for the SEC Western Division Championship. I definitely think with this powder puff schedule, non-conference, and SEC fans, don't jump all over me. I keep emphasizing non-conference powder puffs. In conference play, let's look at it. The opener in SEC plays at LSU in Game 4. Pivotal for Mississippi State. LSU will probably not be an elite team this year. Still a top 15 or 20 team, but not a vintage LSU team. They've got things to work out on offense after losing all that offensive explosiveness from 2013. Jeremy Hill, Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Mettenberger. Okay, then the open date. So Mississippi State going to LSU. Would have been nice to have that game in Starkville this season, but they've got to go to LSU. But that's very winnable. It's a toss-up game. Then they've got the open date. So if they go into that open date at 4-0, look out. They could do something. Okay, Texas A&M and Auburn at home. Would not expect to win both of those games. But if the Bulldogs can win one of those two, most likely against Texas A&M, both games at home, the Aggies and the Tigers, then they're at 5-1. Okay, then they've got another open date. A couple softies at Kentucky and Arkansas at home. Of course, the Razorbacks gave them trouble last year in Fayetteville in overtime, but they got past Brett Bielema's team. Kentucky on the road should win that game. Then that big UT Martin clash. So at this point, Mississippi State could be 8-1 going into the home stretch of Alabama on the road, Vanderbilt, and then the rivalry game, the Egg Bowl at Ole Miss this season. So for Mississippi State, as we like to do, let's look at the non-division games. Of course, they've got the division games that are exactly the same as everybody else in college football's toughest division, the SEC Western Division. Who do they play in the East? Mississippi State. I don't know who got paid off in making this decision, but when the non-division rivalry games were decided way back, Mississippi State drew Kentucky. So they get Kentucky, of course, and then they also have to play Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a very solid team, coming off a couple 9-4 campaigns under James Franklin. Franklin off to Penn State. Derek Mason takes over. We would expect Vandy, despite the loss of its quarterback and most of its secondary, one of the best secondaries in the country in 2013. Vandy's going to be tough, but probably not as tough as they've been the past 2 years. So Mississippi State definitely catches a break with Vandy and Kentucky from the SEC Eastern Division. Look at this schedule, and I'm looking at 9-3. That's not the prediction. Don't put it on record. But right now, as we approach fall camp, like Mississippi State to win about 9 games against this schedule. Again, finally, they're going to schedule somebody. We're going to have to wait till 2018. But they've got Kansas State, thanks to Twitter, Kansas State, Mississippi State hooking up in 2018 and 19. All right, State fans. Hail State. Tell me what you think about your schedule here in 2014. Right here on Mark Rogers TV.